So in this video, we'll be learning how to find the arc length of a parametric equation. So what do we mean by a parametric equation? What that basically means is our x and y are in terms of a third variable called t, and that's it. So the formula is as follows. L, which is denoted by arc length, is equal to radical of x prime squared plus y prime squared dt, and that's it. And we have the lower and upper limit, as let's denote them as a and b, where t is between a and b. So let's look at some examples, and this will be much more clear to understand. So in our first example, we have x as cosine t, y equal to t plus sine of t, and we have the limits from 0 and pi, and we want to find the length. So just looking at the formula, we need to, first step is to find the derivative of x and y. So let's do that. Derivative of cosine t will be equal to negative sine t, and we need to get the square of the prime of x and the prime of y. So let's just square it right now. It's going to be x prime squared is equal to sine t squared, as the negative sign becomes positive. Now let's look at y. So y prime is going to be equal to, the derivative of t is going to be 1 since we're deriving in terms of t, and the derivative of sine t is plus cosine t. Now we need to square it again. So y prime squared is equal to, is going to be 1 plus cosine t squared. So we need to use a square here, which is equal to 1 plus 2ab, so 2 cosine t plus cosine squared t. So now let's plug everything in the formula. So we have integration from 0 to pi of radical sine squared t, which is x prime squared, plus 1 plus 2 cosine t plus cosine squared t. Now how can we simplify this? The first thing that we notice here is that we have a sine squared and a cosine squared. And as we all know, the most basic formula, sine squared t plus cosine squared t is equal to 1. So we can replace both of these by 1, so it will become 2 plus 2 cosine t. So that's pretty straightforward. So 2 plus 2 cosine t, and we can also just reduce this. Now there is a common factor inside the radical, which is 2. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take 2 outside, so it's going to be 2 into 1 plus cosine t, and if you want to take this radical 2 outside, that will become, the final simplest form will be radical 2 integration from 0 to pi of 1 plus cosine t, and this is the simplest form that we can get from factoring dt. So now how do we solve for this? It is not very obvious at first when you see it, but whenever you are doing these type of questions, you always need to remember the half angle identities. So let me just write it over here. It's going to be cosine squared of t is equal to 1 plus cosine of 2t over 2. So what basically we are doing here is we are halving the angle from 2t into t, and this is a cosine. And what we have over here is just a t. So we need to somehow write this formula so that we can use it ourselves in our equation, because we don't have 2t, we have only 1t, right? So let me write it again. So what we can do here is we can say that 1 plus cosine of t over 2 is equal to cosine squared t over 2. So you need to remember these half angle identities for simplification, even for the sine half angle. And here, if we rearrange this, it's going to be 2 cosine squared t over 2 is equal to 1 plus cosine t, which we have here, right? So here we can replace this 1 plus cosine t by 2 cosine squared t over 2. Here again we can filter out the radical 2 outside, because we have a 2 inside the radical. So it's going to go outside and it's just going to multiply by the other radical 2 and become 2. So it's going to be 2 radical of 0 to pi radical of cosine squared t over 2 dt. And now it is pretty simple, right? Because you just take the radical, it will cancel out with the square here. And now once we integrate cosine t over 2, that's going to be equal to the limits, don't forget that, sine t over 2 over half, and let's simplify this and then put the limits. So we have 4 sine t over 2, and you take the limits from pi to 0, and we get the final answer as 4. And that's it. So this is how it's done. If you have any questions about anything that we covered in this video, I'll be more than happy to answer. So feel free to ask in the comment section. And as always, I do have a shortcut method for you guys. So what you have to reach, or what you have to do until to use a shortcut method, is to find, of course, the x prime squared and the y prime squared. And you don't need to simplify this. And what you have to do exactly is you would need the radical, or sorry, the integration on the calculator, and just type out the equation. So it's going to be sine squared t plus 1 plus cosine t squared and dt. So it doesn't matter if it's dt or dx on calculator. And here we are provided the limits. So in some questions, when you're not provided the limits, you can just put anything, so 0 and 1. But here we do have the limit, so it's going to be 0 and pi. And once you have typed that on a calculator and entered, you would get the exact answer as 4. So in many questions, you are not given the limits. So what can we do for that? So in that question, whatever final answer that we are remaining with, let's say 4 sine t over 2, we would put any two random values as the limit in the original question. So let's say 0 and 1. And let's just assume that we get the answer of 1 over here, or 1.3. And we would do the exact same thing over here. We would put the limits as 0 and 1. And if we get the same answer as 1.3, this means that your answer or your workings are correct. And your final answer is of course correct also. So if you do need me to do more examples on this topic, feel free to ask in the comment section. I'll make another additional video. And thanks for watching. I'll see you next time then.